The morning sun hadn't yet burned off the dew when I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand, and saw the excavator's claw hovering over my grandfather's wall like a vulture eyeing roadkill. The machine's engine growled, drowning out the bird song, and the operatora guy in a faded cap with a cigarette dangling from his lips didn't even glance my way as the hydraulic arm descended. First crack, then collapse. The stones, each hand-placed by my grandfather after he came home from Korea, tumbled like teeth knocked loose in a brawl. Dust billowed. The neighbor, Lydia Whitmore, HOA chairwoman by self-appointment, stewed on her manicured lawn, sipping iced tea through a striped straw, her smile sharp enough to slice through steel. She'd won, or so she thought. What she didn't know, that wall wasn't just a wall. It was a registered historical artifact, protected under a little-known Veterans Preservation Act. And I had the paperwork in a fireproof safe, right next to Grandpa's Purple Heart. But let's rewind. 9 months earlier, I'd moved back into the old family home after a decade abroad. The neighborhood had changed, drastically. Where there'd once been sprawling oaks and wildflower patches, there were now identical McMansions with identical beige facades and identical live, laugh, love signs hanging in identical kitchens. And at the center of it all, Lydia Whitmore. Blonde, pearly-smiled, the kind of woman who hosted community VY Sioning meetings in her Lee VY-ing room while passive-aggressively judging your shrubbery. The first time we met, she'd handed me a 3-ring binder titled Neighborhood Harmony Catalanese, document thicker than some state constitutions, and said, "We like to keep things cohesive here." Ideologa. Big mistake. The war started small. A citation from my non-compliant mailbox. It was original to the house, circa 1952. A warning about my unsightly oak tree. Shade was apparently a neighborhood hazard. Then came the real target, the wall. Lydia hated it, called it depressingly antiquated, said it clashed with the modern aesthetic of the subd VY Shown. I told her it was supposed to. That's when she threatened to have it removed for safety reasons. I replied with a 2-word email. Try me. Things escalated. First, the inspections. Men in polo shirts, armed with clipboards, circling the property like vultures. One claimed to be from the Neighborhood Aesthetic Compliance Committee. I asked for his credentials. He handed me a business card with a font I last saw on a middle school PowerPoint. Then came the water. I noticed a drop in pressure one evening. A quick investigation revealed an unauthorized PVC line snaking from my private, well-installed by Grandpa in the 60s directly to Lydia's prize-winning rose garden. The woman had been stealing my water for months. That night, I called my cousin Jake, a plumber with a vendetta against petty tyrants. We rerouted her illegal tap straight into her septic tank. The next morning, Lydia's roses were drowning in something far less fragrant than rainwater. She posted frantically in the HOA group about a sewage backup, blaming the city. I sipped my coffee and watched her scramble from my kitchen window. But she didn't back down. Then came the bulldozer. I'd expected more fine C court order, maybe, or some shady bureaucratic maneuvering. But Lydia went full scorched earth. No warning, no permit, just a rented excavator and a crew who didn't ask questions. I stood there, gripping my coffee mug so hard the ceramic threatened to crack as the machine reduced 60 years of history to rubble. Lydia watched from her porch, sipping her damn iced tea, looking smugger than a cat who'd knocked over a vase. That's when I went nuclear. The safe in Grandpa's study held more than just metals. There were blueprints, notarized letters from the Historical Society, and the golden ticket, a 1998 federal designation recognizing the wall as a protected veteran-crafted landmark. I scanned everything, emailed it to the State Preservation Office, the local news, and just for fun the HOA's entire mailing list. Then I called a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Elena Vasquez, a former Marine JAG officer who specialized in shredding bullies in court. Her reaction? A slow, predatory grin. Oh, this is going to be fun. The fallout was glorious. First, the city slapped Lydia with fines for unauthorized demolition. Then the Historical Society launched an investigation. Then her neighbors turned on her when they learned she'd used HOA funds to pay for the bulldozer. The emergency HOA meeting was a bloodbath. Lydia, pale and sweating, tried to claim she'd acted for the community. A retired Marine in the back row stood up and said, "Ma'am, you're about as community-minded as a termite." The coup de grâce? The court order. Lydia was forced to pay for the wall's reconstruction using the original stone, sourced from the same quarry Grandpa had. She had to issue a public apology, print it in the local paper, and post it on the community board for 3 months. And, my personal favorite, she was barred from holding any HOA position for life. The wall rose again, stone by stone, this time with an engraved plaque at its base, built by SGT. Daniel Hart, 1953. Rebuilt by Justice, 2023. Lydia sold her house 2 months later. Rumor has it she moved into a condo, with very strict HOA rules. As for me, I kept Grandpa's metals polished, the walls standing, and a copy of the court order framed in the hallway. Some legacies aren't just built to last. They're built to fight back. The rebuilt wall stood taller now, its stones darker with age, but just as unyielding as the day Grandpa laid them. The plaque gleamed under the afternoon sun, a silent sentinel watching over the neighborhood. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. Lydia Whitmore might have fled, but the war had left scars. For weeks, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. The Harbor WWII Gazette ran a follow-up piece titled, "How One Veteran's Wall Exposed an HOA's Corruption." My phone blew up with calls from reporters, others from strangers who'd heard the story and wanted to share their own HOA horror tales. A few even drove by just to see the infamous wall, snapping photos like it was a monument. But the real surprise came from the Historical Society. They didn't just want to preserve the wall, they wanted to honor it. A ceremony was planned. Veterans groups, local officials, even a documentary crew showed interest. Suddenly, my quiet street was the center of attention, and Lydia's name was whispered like a curse. Meanwhile, the new HOA board a ragtag group of actual reasonable humans repealed half of Lydia's old rules. No more fines for non-approved flower colors. No more mandatory mailbox replacements. They even voted to plant a damn community garden where Lydia's precious hydrangeas once stood. Irony tasted sweet. The unexpected enemy. Then came the letter. It arrived in a crisp, legal-sized envelope, postmarked from the city's zoning office. Inside, a notice that my property was being REVOLTSed for potential non-compliance with updated neighborhood architectural standards. I laughed. Then I read the fine print. The complaint wasn't from Lydia, it was from her husband, Richard Whitmore, a man I'd barely seen, a ghost in his own home, now stepping into the light with a vendetta. Apparently, he'd been biding his time, waiting for the dust to settle before striking. Elena Vasquez, my lawyer, was delighted. "Oh, this is rich," she said, flipping through the paperwork. "He's trying to argue that the rebuilt wall violates setback regulations. Which, by the way, it doesn't. But he's banking on bureaucracy to wear you down." I smirked. Guess he doesn't know I've got nothing but time. Richard's move was sloppy. Desperate. He'd underestimated 2 things. My patience. I'd already dug through decades of zoning laws once. Doing it again was just a matter of caffeine and spite. The neighborhood's loyalty. When word got out that Richard was coming after the wall again, the same people who'd once stayed silent under Lydia's reign started speaking up. Mrs. Calloway from down the street, who'd never so much as waved at me before, brought over a lemon cake and said, "You tell me what you need, dear." Even Dale, the retired firefighter, showed up at the zoning hearing gun prompted to call Richard's complaint a load of vindictive horseshit. The hearing lasted 20 minutes. Richard's case collapsed faster than Lydia's reputation. A month later, the Whitmore's house sold. Not to another family, but to a developer. Rumor had it Richard took a massive loss, desperate to cut ties with the neighborhood that had turned against them. The day the MOVYing truck pulled away, I walked over to the property line where the wall stood. The new stones had already started to weather, blending with the old. I ran my hand along the rough surface, remembering Grandpa's stories how he'd carried each rock himself, how he'd said, "A man's legacy isn't in what he builds, but in what he protects." I thought about Lydia and Richard, about the battles they'd picked and the wars they'd lost. Then I looked at the wall still standing, still defiant, and smiled. Some things, once rooted, can't be torn down. The developer tore down the Whitmore's house. In its place, they built a park. A small one, just a patch of grass with a bench and a plaque dedicating it to community harmony. Ironic considering. The wall still stands. The HOA still exists, but it's quieter now. Less about control, more about actual community. And me? I still get the occasional email from someone fighting their own HOA tyrant, asking for advice. I always tell them the same thing. Dig deeper than they expect. Fight longer than they can. And for God's sake, keep the paperwork. Because in the end, the only thing stronger than a bulldozer is a man who knows what he's defending. And I had a wall to prove it. If you were the one in this story, how would you react? Would you stand up and fight back, or accept the unreasonable pressure and control from the HOA? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with more people. Your small action gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more intense and engaging stories. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.